What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another YouTube video. I said that we're going to start hammering out more informational type YouTube videos, help you guys become better traders, right? This is free sauce I'm posting on my YouTube. We're going to go through, confluences, obviously psychological things, but it's truly whatever you guys want me to. So I always post polls on the Instagram and then take comments from the last videos and then just kind of hammer things out. I'm going to try to do one of these every day or every other day. To just start hammering out YouTube videos, give you guys free sauce so you guys can continue to learn everything like that. So today what we're going to be going over, as you can see on the screen, is SMT Divergence. This is a really big confluence for me recently. I've been loving SMTs. I've been loving using them. I never used to use them, and I kind of found them out. I've always heard about them, but just started using them like very heavily a couple months ago, and they're extremely useful. It's kind of like that last thing on the tip, of your trade where it's like, oh shit, this is a really good trade. So let's go over it. Let's go whatever SMTs are, which ones are going to be the most useful, which ones are not going to be as useful, and how exactly we can use them to craft our trades, as well as find draws on liquidity and our bias for the day, right? So what exactly is an SMT divergence, right? So an SMT divergence is what happens when there's a pair of two correlated assets and one of them does something that the other one does not, right? So in our scenario, in the scenario where I trade, right, and probably all of you guys trade as well, is NQ and ES. Those are the two that we're going to be talking about, right? Those are correlated assets. They move off of each other. They move essentially the same. And we're going to go over that, show you guys exactly how that works, right? So let's say on this left side right here, this is the NQ chart, okay? And then on the right side, this is the ES chart, right? And as you can see, these two, charts, let's say this is the actual price action. These are the candlesticks, right? We just put it on the line, right? This is the price action of that certain point, that day, whatever, right? The main difference between these two right here is this high getting swept out right here. Let me find this tool. As you can see, this high here at NQ, boom, gets swept out, taken out right there, and this high right here does not, right? And so what do we know about highs and lows getting swept out, right? Well, that's a liquidity sweep. If you don't know what that is, you got to lock in. All right, I'm just going to be completely honest. This is a liquidity sweep, right? So a liquidity sweep in general is a pretty good confluence if it is a strong drawn liquidity that we are going to reverse off of that high or that low or that fair value gap getting swept out, whatever it may be, right? A liquidity sweep in general is a very good confluence. Now, when we're adding an SMT on top of that, that's an even better confluence. So exactly what is an SMT, right? So an SMT is going to be when one asset takes out a high or a low and the other one does not. Right? Now, since these are correlated assets, right, when one of them takes some form of liquidity, the other one, in theory, has already done that as well. And so this is why this is so useful and this is why this is so helpful, because what happens when one of them takes out a point of liquidity? Well, the other one theoretically already has as well, right? That's how we can use that to our advantage in a situation like this, right? So we see that NQ comes up, boom, takes out a high. Well, there you go. That's what we're looking for. We can see, boom, that swept out the high. Now we look over at ES. Well, ES has not swept out that high. There you go. There's your SMT. And the reason that this is so important is because ES no longer needs to push all the way up here and take out this high because NQ already has, right? So therefore, we can anticipate a reversal happening off of this SMT, right? And that's how we can use this very strictly and very highly to our advantage. Right, so pairing these two together, we can probably assume that in a situation like this, there's going to be some sort of reversal happening, something of that nature, right? Now this can also happen to the complete opposite side, right? We can have this being, something going short, and we can have this low getting swept out here. However, this low did not get swept out, right? Therefore, that's gonna give us more confluence that we're probably going to head in that same direction, right? And now the reason this is so important, the reason that we can use this to our advantage is because these assets are correlated, right? And what exactly does that mean? Well, they move off of each other. If you look at the NQ and the ES chart right next to each other, they will have the same moves, right? They'll be moving essentially in the same direction at the same pace, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, since they are correlated, like I said, when one of them takes out some form of liquidity, theoretically the other one already has, right? So what happens when one of them takes something out and the other one has not? Well, this is indicating reversal because in a scenario like this, let's say NQ takes out this low. Well, ES is very far from this low. Therefore, ES is already showing signs of a reversal, whereas NQ has taken this out, right? So in this moment, ES is leading right now because it has already started that reversal and NQ is lagging behind. Right now, a lot of people talk about which ones we should take the trade on, whether it be the leading index or the lagging index or something like that, right? Well, there's two ways that you can go about this, right? Theoretically, you trade the leading index or asset, whichever one you're doing, right? Just because it's likely to hit your next draws on liquidity faster, right? Since ES is up here already and NQ is all the way down here, ES is more likely to hit out these highs before anything else happens, right? Whereas NQ is already down here, has to make a larger move to come back and take out these highs. Now, the way that I trade, I don't care, right? I strictly trade NQ. They're slightly different price action. NQ is a little bit more volatile, has a little bit more volume. I'm used to that, therefore I only trade NQ, right? Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. You can obviously test this out, back test it, whatever, but one of them is going to be leading and one of them is going to be lagging, and it's not going to be the same every time, right? Sometime NQ will sweep it out, ES won't, and vice versa for highs and for lows, right? Now, the biggest thing and the biggest misconception that people use SMTs wrong is they think that any single high or any single low that gets swept out is some sort of SMT, right? And that's not true. The main one that we are going to be using and the main one that I like to teach is a high getting swept inside of a fair value gap. That is the most important one, right? That is the most important one. That is going to be the most useful and the most important because any single 1 minute high can get swept out and it won't get swept out on the other one, and it's not going to really do anything, right? Now we need to pair it with something else. SMTs cannot be just used by themselves, right? It is a confluence to help you determine where price is going to go in the short term, right? So you're not going to be able to just say, oh, there's an SMT, perfect, reversing, right? Because at some point that could catch up and we could eventually continue to take that high out, right? We could be at a certain point right here. NQ could have taken this out. You say, oh, there's an SMT, you enter short, but then ES takes this high out and we continue back up, right? So you have to pair it with other things, right? Obviously, you're going to be pairing it with your drawn liquidity and your bias for the day, right? Whether you're bearish or you're bullish, you got to pair it with that, number one, right? Then you have to pair it with some sort of lower time frame confluence, being a 15-minute or a 5-minute confirmation setup or confluence, whatever. I like to use fair value gaps personally, right? So my dream setup, my perfect setup would be something like this, right? Where we have a 15-minute or a 5-minute gap right here, a high right where that gap is, and then we sweep out that high, tap into that gap on one of the assets, and on the other one you can see that we do not do that, right? And that's my dream setup because that's giving me the confirmation. Number one, I would take this trade regardless, right? If we have something like this, if both of them are doing the same thing and we have, boom, 15-minute or 5-minute liquidity sweep, continuation back down, I'm taking that trade regardless. But that SMT is what's going to make it A+ for me and give me full conviction that we are going to go back to the downside. So that's my personal favorite, right? As you can see from this high right here up to here, that gets swept out. This high down to here does not, right? There's our SMT right there. That's perfect. That's how we use it to form our trades, right? So this is like medium time frame. You can slightly call it higher time frame, but this is usually going to be used in like the 5 or the 15-minute, right? So you're going to see these SMTs, which to me are the most important, in around the 5 or the 15-minute time frames, right? I call these external SMTs, right? Now, you can use SMTs, they're called, internal SMTs or candle SMTs, where it's literally going to be like 2 1-minute candles right next to each other, and one of them is going to be higher than the other, or you'll have 3 of them, one of them will be higher than the other. That's extra confirmation as well, right? Me personally, I don't really trade like that. I don't need it, but SMTs can be used on any time frame whatsoever. It does not need to be a certain one, right? And that's what I'm going to show you guys here. So obviously you can use SMTs for your confirmation, for your setup, right? And then you can also use it for your daily bias, right? So in a situation like this, once again, let's say this was the 4-hour time frame instead of the 15-minute, right? So that's giving us higher time frame confirmation that, boom, okay, we're probably bearish, right? We're inside of a 4-hour gap. We just swept a high in there. and we did not sweep it on ES, right? Or vice versa. That's giving us the conviction, oh, we're probably going to be bearish for the day, right? But that's not giving us a setup. That's not saying, oh, we need to enter, right? That's where you pair it and you stack it with other confluences on top of each other, right? So your higher time frame, then medium time frame, then you can go lower time frame, right? If you want to use those candle SMTs, whatever it may be, you can totally do that. It's fine with me, all right? I don't personally need that, but it's not a bad confirmation, confluence. Anyways, with that being said, I'm going to show you guys some examples of exactly how SMTs are used in the charts, exactly how you can find them, everything like that. So first things first, what you're going to want to do is you're going to come up to this top corner right here. You're going to click the layout and you're going to click this second one right here, right? Now what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to see both charts at the same exact time, right? And then next, what you're also going to want to do to sync these charts up is click this and you'll have every single one of these clicked except symbol. If you click symbol, then they'll both be the same. You won't be able to change them. But interval, crosshair, time, date range, you're all going to want the same, right? Because then they move around. And then when you change time frames, they will both change time frames just like that. All right, example number one, this is going to be in the 5-minute time frame, right? This right here, maybe not looking like anything to you guys, right? But however, we have two pretty significant highs right here, right? As you can see, this high up to here, this has been swept out on NQ. That same high over here has not been swept out on ES. And like I said, this so happens to line up with an hourly gap, right? So we're not going to be using SMTs unless they are lining up with some sort of fair value gap, right? Any high or low getting swept out means absolutely nothing without A, higher time frame confirmation or conviction, right, being your draw on liquidity, and then B, some sort of lower time frame confirmation, right? So you can't just use any sort of 1-minute sweep or any sort of 2-minute sweep. It has to be lined up with something else, right? You can find a sweep in an SMT in the 1 minute, but make sure it's backed up by some sort of fair value gap, right? So in this scenario, we have this hourly gap right here. You see we have these two highs. This one got swept out. However, on ES, it did not get swept out. Therefore, that's pretty good confirmation, right? We're number one, already inside of an hourly gap. And number two, we sweep it out on one of them and not the other one, therefore gives us confirmation we're probably going to reverse back to the downside. And as you can see, after this happens, what do we get? Well, we get our entry confirmation. This 5-minute inversion right here, we would enter right here and probably target these lows down here. Guess what? It plays out, and this is the exact trade that I ended up taking yesterday, right? That being said, that is the, entry confirmation that you're going to be using. This is the kind of setup that I see and I'm like, yes, that's perfect, right? Because this is lower time frame. This is the 5-minute time frame. We're seeing the SMT in real time. It's lining up with a higher time frame gap, and then we are able to get our entry for the actual trade itself, right? So that's how you want to be using SMTs, right? Because, and like I said, in any scenario, we could have 1-minute highs being swept out and not, backed up by anything else. And they're not going to work just strictly because it's not a correct, trade, and you're not using SMTs correctly. That's the biggest thing is I see people using SMTs incorrectly all the time. They are just seeing any sort of high getting swept out saying, oh, no, there's an SMT there. Oh, there's an SMT, like blah, 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 blah. I can't use that. There's an SMT, right? And that's just not how we need to be using them. Next is going to be our bias SMT, right? Or our draw on liquidity SMT to help us kind of determine where we want to go on the lower or the higher time frame. Right? So in this scenario, you can see it. It's literally going to bite you in the face. It's right in front of you, right? This is probably in the 4-hour too. Well, it's gone now. We're going to go back to the 1 hour, okay? These candlesticks right here, right? As you can see, this low right here gets swept out on NQ. That same low from ES does not get swept out. There's an SMT, but what do we also see at the same time? This is backed up by an hourly gap right here, right? That is the biggest thing. If I could stress one thing, that is going to be it. It's that it's always going to be backed by some sort of higher time frame gap, right? Once again, there's also a 4-hour gap here as well. It is always going to be backed by some sort of higher time frame gap, right? We're going to be getting something to give us the confirmation that we are going to reverse something like that, right? Now, if there was no gap here, I wouldn't really, necessarily recognize this, or I'd recognize it, but I'd be like, not valid yet, right? We need it in some sort of gap. okay? And you'll go through, you can go through the charts and you can look and you can see highs getting swept out, lows getting swept out, whatever it may be. And you'll see that the ones that are backed up by fair value gaps or actual, strong liquidity pools are the ones that are going to be respected, okay? And I want you guys to go through. I want you to look at the charts, see which ones are actually getting respected, vice versa. Look at the ones that are backed up by gaps and whatnot, okay? Lastly is going to be that candle SMT or that final entry confluence confirmation SMT, right? This is going to be something in like the 1 minute or the 2 minute, maybe the 3 minute, right? Something where you're going to be taking your entry off of. And the example that I'm going to be showing you is the example from today. This trade actually ended up failing. The only reason though is because there was news at this point. This was actually a really, really good trade. A+ setup. Unfortunately, your boy did not know that tariffs were going to be getting announced today. They actually got denied at like 10:01, which is this candle right here. As you can see, huge pump off of that. Unfortunately, this did end up failing, but we'll go through it anyways just to show you guys an example, right? So this right here, this is what we're looking at. This high right here and this high right here. As you can see on ES, this high does not get swept out. Right, and what do we talk about, right? Well, it needs to be backed up by some sort of gap. Number one, this right here is a 15-minute gap that we are, delivering off of. Number two, this is an hourly gap that we're delivering off of. That's perfect, right? That's what we love to see. That's what we like to see. Now, the main thing that I want to stress to you guys is this alone does absolutely nothing, right? Once again, this alone does absolutely nothing. Okay, because you can see this 1 minute SMT, you go, oh, this is an SMT, blah, 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 right? It's not going to do anything unless you pair it with something in the higher time frame, right? So in this scenario, we paired it with this hourly gap. Our daily bias for the day was bearish. We had draws on liquidity lower. We had this 930 wick right here that wanted to get taken out. Everything in that nature, right? That was what was giving me the confirmation to eventually take this trade to go back down, right? So that being said, you got anything from this, make sure that you are using SMTs along with something else in the higher time frames, along with gaps, other liquidity pools, whatever you guys trade, make sure you're using them with some other form of confirmation to get the trades and to get the actual entries that you guys want. But with that being said, like I said in the beginning of this video, let me know down in the comments if you guys want to see any other sort of videos. If there's one that I have not made a video on, let me know. I'm open to every idea as long as it's not dumb, but I love teaching you guys. I want you guys to obviously be the best traders that you possibly could. That's why I'm making these YouTube videos in the first place. But yeah, that's going to be it. That's SMT Divergence. Questions, comments, concerns, leave them down in the comments, bro, and I'll respond to pretty much every single one of you guys. If you have specific questions, you can DM me on Instagram. It does not matter. I'm here to help. That's what I'm doing. Anyways, I'll catch you boys in the next one.